What is up, everybody? It is JT Sports. I'm back to you guys with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. And on this episode, I'm going to be giving you guys my reaction to the college football semifinal games. Alabama defeated Cincinnati. Georgia took down Michigan. We have a rematch of the SEC championship game, Alabama, Georgia, and the rematch, everything on the line for the national championship game. Now, if this is your first time listening to the JT Sports Podcast, welcome. I appreciate you for tuning in. Make sure that you go ahead and follow me on all of my social media platforms. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at JT Sports _. Once again, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at JT Sports _. And lastly, make sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, which is JT Sports. Alabama defeated Cincinnati 27-6 in the first college football semifinal matchup of this season. And I'm going to be honest with you. I was really impressed with the way Cincinnati played in this game, at least on the defensive side of the football, because this was probably the most entertaining semifinal matchup that we've seen this year. We all thought that Michigan and Georgia was going to be a phenomenal game. We all saw how that game turned out. It was a blowout. It wasn't close. Meanwhile, you look at this Cincinnati-Alabama matchup, there were many people out there, I would say about 90% of people out there, who felt like Alabama was not only going to beat Cincinnati, but they were going to beat them and put at least 40, maybe 50 points up on the board. And I was really surprised with how the Bearcats defense performed in this game. Like, I know you look at the final score and it's going to say it wasn't close, but there was a stretch in this game from the first quarter to the third quarter when Cincinnati's defense really carried this team. And it's unfortunate that Cincinnati wasn't able to generate much offense because, one, they didn't have the offensive line that's capable enough to hold up front against the front seven of Alabama, and two, they were lacking elite playmakers on the outside. Now, the biggest question that we all had about Cincinnati was going to be, okay, if this game is close going into the fourth quarter, which, you know, they still had a chance to win this game going into the fourth quarter. It was only 6-17, so Cincinnati still was in this thing. They got to the fourth quarter. Now that they have enough horses to find a way to pull off the upset, they didn't. And the reason why was because their offensive line struggled all game trying to protect Desmond Ridder. And even when Desmond Ridder had a little bit of time to throw the football, his wide receivers weren't really creating all that separation. So for Cincinnati, did they belong in the college football playoffs this year? Yes, they did. When you look at how this game played out, like, Cincinnati's defense was on fire. This definitely looked like one of the best four teams in college football. I feel like they deserve to be in. Now, what does this vote for the rest of the G5? I don't really think it means that much, in my opinion. Like, a lot of people keep saying Cincinnati proved that G5 teams can somewhat be competitive. Like, not really. You know, nothing has really changed. I mean, Cincinnati still lost. They still got dominated when it came to being able to stop the run. Like, Alabama literally didn't have to pass the football all that much, even though they did try to pass the football, and Cincinnati's pass defense was pretty good in this game, but their run defense had no answer for Brian Robinson. And my biggest key to victory for Cincinnati, if you guys watched my preview and prediction for this matchup, was going to be if Cincinnati was going to have a chance of pulling off the upset, they were going to have to be able to slow down the run game. And I didn't expect that to happen. I expect for Brian Robinson to have a big day on the ground, and boy, did he. Had 25 carries for 198 rushing yards. He was averaging nearly 8 yards per carry. Like, Cincinnati had no answer for him. But despite the fact that Cincinnati was unable to stop the run, surprisingly, they still were in this game until we got into the fourth quarter, and that's when Alabama started just to completely dominate Cincinnati, and that's where this game pretty much tilted all the way in Alabama's favor. But I definitely feel like Cincinnati definitely did show a lot of people, you know, that this definitely was a team that deserved to be in. They earned their playoff spot. They gave a better fight, in my my opinion, than Notre Dame did against Alabama the last time they played. Like, I was really impressed, and I'm really proud in how Cincinnati performed. Now, what does this mean for the rest of the G5? Not much. And as a matter of fact, there was somebody saying we probably won't see another G5 team get into the college football playoffs until it expands. Even if you expand the college football playoffs to 8 or 12 teams, like, you're still not going to get a G5 team in, because you rarely see a group of 5 team like a Cincinnati or Boise State that's capable of making an argument for why they should be included in the college football playoffs. Teams like Cincinnati and Boise State probably only come twice a decade. So we probably aren't going to see another Cincinnati for the next couple of years. But Cincinnati's defense definitely impressed me. I didn't expect that their defense would be carrying them in this game. I thought that their offense was going to be able to carry them. I thought that this was going to be a high-scoring game. This was a pretty low-scoring affair. You look at all of the pressure that Cincinnati was able to get on Bryce Young. I was really impressed. But if their defensive line was just a little bit bigger, not even a little bit bigger, like they had more bigger and more athletic guys up front, and they were able to find a way to slow down that run game, this game could have been even more closer. But Cincinnati's offensive line wasn't able to give Desmond Ridder all that much time to throw. There were a lot of Bearcats fans who said that Desmond Ridder was playing scared. I don't think Desmond Ridder was playing scared. Like, I mean, the dude pretty much had no time to throw the football. And when he did, his wide receivers weren't really getting all that open. Cincinnati, one thing that we definitely saw was how huge the talent gap was. And on top of that, they didn't have enough wide receivers who were skilled enough to create separation against Alabama's secondary. Now, Alabama's secondary was a little banged up in this game, but even despite the fact that Alabama wasn't, at full strength in the secondary, they didn't really need to be, because Cincinnati didn't even have enough time to throw the football, enough to even take many shots downfield. Then in the second half, Cincinnati tried to get Desmond Ridder a little bit more involved in the ground game. That didn't really work all that much. At the end of the day, for Cincinnati, very good season. Did they show that they can compete with the big boys? I mean, they showed that they can, somewhat be a little competitive for the first 3 quarters, but I can't really say that Cincinnati showed us anything that they deserve. Well, I can't say that Cincinnati showed me that they were good enough to, be on the same stratosphere as Alabama, some of the blue bloods of college football. I'm not saying they didn't deserve to be in, but they still have ways to go until they get on the level of Alabama, Georgia, or the Ohio States of the world. And that all starts with being able to get more athletic and more talented guys up front on the line of scrimmage. Cincinnati's defense played very well in this game, but overall they weren't able to stop the run game. Their secondary played really good. Like, Jamison Williams, for the most part, was pretty much held in check. Like, he had 8 receptions. Well, he had 7 receptions. He was targeted 8 times in this game. He only had 62 receiving yards, no touchdowns. Ja'Cory Brooks had a big touchdown, which pretty much, was really big. And I can't say that Cincinnati really, pushed Alabama, because for me to say that Cincinnati pushed Alabama, you would have to say that Cincinnati had a point during this game that you could have looked back upon and said, okay, like, Cincinnati may be able to scare Alabama. Cincinnati may win this thing. There was never a point in this game when you felt like Cincinnati had a shot at winning this game. Like, even from the opening drive, when Cincinnati allowed Alabama to drive down the field, and when Cincinnati answered back with a field goal after that drive, I still didn't really see any scenario when I was like, Cincinnati may have a shot at winning this thing. Like, I was just watching this game and I was just like, okay, like, Cincinnati's in it, but they haven't really showed me that they can win it. So I look at Cincinnati. Did they have a competitive football game? Somewhat, but at the end of the day, they didn't really have enough necessary talent up front to push this game into the fourth quarter. This was a good game for the first 3 quarters. Then in the fourth quarter, Alabama started to break away. Now, Bryce Young definitely had a okay showing. He threw 3 touchdown passes. He had an interception. Cincinnati was getting some heavy pressure on him. a lot of pressure on him. Myjai Sanders was an absolute monster in this game. Number 21 for Cincinnati, he was a one-man wrecking crew on that defensive line. But if Cincinnati had a little bit more athletic big men up front, then maybe they could have been able to slow down the run game. Another thing that hurt Cincinnati was the fact that they weren't able to make Alabama pay for mistakes. Like when Alabama had that botched punt that ended up getting recovered by Ja'Cory Brooks, like Cincinnati needed that. Like if you're going to beat Alabama, you're going to have to need some luck, especially if you are Cincinnati and you're going into this game with a talent disadvantage. So for Cincinnati, you weren't able to capitalize when Alabama made mistakes. Even when you got that interception on Bryce Young, you weren't able to capitalize off that. Like anytime you play a team like Alabama, you have to have a little bit of luck, and you also have to make them pay when they make mistakes. Cincinnati wasn't able to do that. On top of that, Cincinnati also had mistakes on their behalf when it came to penalties. Like number 20 for Cincinnati lost his composure in this game. He had 2 costly penalties. And when you're playing a team like Alabama, you cannot let your emotions get the best of you. Like you have to be composed and calm and have your cool at all times, and he definitely lost his cool. He had a really critical penalty. So for Alabama, great win. This definitely was a really good Cincinnati team. I definitely believe that they deserve to be in. They were one of the best 4 teams in college football. I don't think there were any other teams that were behind Cincinnati that probably could have gave Alabama a competitive game. You probably could have said Ohio State or whatnot, but overall, Cincinnati definitely showed that they deserve to be in the college football playoffs for this year. And we know where they rank amongst, the big boys in college football. They still have a way to go, but definitely this game was somewhat competitive at some stretch. But we got into the full quarter, and that's what it was going to come down to. A lot of people didn't believe that Cincinnati was going to have enough horses to be able to pull off the upset, because they didn't believe that they were going to be able to have enough talent to get it done in the fourth quarter, and that's what happened. So Alabama advances to the national championship game, defeating Cincinnati 27-6. But I'm really proud in how Cincinnati fought in this game, because this game, a lot of people expected this to be an Alabama manslaughter. Many people expected Alabama to put 40, maybe 50 points on Cincinnati, and it didn't happen. Their defense held strong. Imagine if their offense could have been way more consistent and could have put a little bit more points on the board and could have helped that defense out. Like, I thought that eventually in the second half, Alabama was going to end up popping 40, because I thought the defense was going to end up getting gassed. And even though their defense did get gassed at the end in the fourth quarter, like overall, their defense still did a very phenomenal job. If their offense could have gave them a little bit more help, maybe they could have played even better. But this was a very good showing from Cincinnati's defense. Wish the offense could have did a lot more. Overall, Alabama still shows us why they are the number 1 team in college football. They defeat the Bearcats and advance to the national championship game.